friends, and welcome to the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. I'm Steve Tatro, and I love talking about all things related to school libraries. I may be an old dog, but I'm always trying to learn new tricks. In each episode of the SLLN podcast, I'll chat with a school librarian about a lesson they love. Hopefully, this can be a place for school librarians to get ideas and find new ways to engage with their students and staff. As a good friend likes to say, we're better together. So I hope this podcast will help school librarians connect with and learn from each other. The opinions and ideas shared in this podcast by myself and my guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. And because school librarians always strive to be good digital citizens, I cite sources when using material that is not my own. Hey everybody, I am so excited. We've got Fallon here, and I am so excited to talk to Fallon because Fallon has such awesome ideas, and we have only had the chance to kind of touch base a couple of times in the past. So I'm really excited. We're going to get some time to just, you and me one-on-one, talk some ideas through. It's going to be awesome. So Fallon, why don't you take a second, introduce yourself for us, tell people where you're at, who you are, what's going on.
All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Steve, for having me on your podcast. I think this is the number one area that we could do better at as school librarians is sharing what we know. So I really appreciate you taking the initiative because I know it's not easy.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you from all of us school librarians that appreciate your hard work along with the others. So my name is Fallon Farokhi, and I am a K-6 school librarian in Kansas City on the Kansas side. And the town that is within Kansas City that I'm in is called Overland Park, Kansas.
I've got family that is right near there. My outlaws, my in-laws are all over that away. So
that's great.
Practically neighbors.
Yes.
So just before we dive into the lesson, how did you end up in school librarianship? Was this like first choice? Was this something that you kind of wove your way to?
Well, I started in elementary education, and then when I was going through my classes, I really loved the children's literature elective that we got to take at the University of Kansas, and we did not have a school librarian program. We still don't have one at KU. So I went ahead and got my elementary education degree and got my master's in curriculum and instruction, also through KU, and really just gravitated towards the literary and research end when I started teaching as a classroom teacher. And I just loved that side of it. When I moved to Indiana, to Bloomington, for my husband's graduate work, we noticed that there was a program right in town in Bloomington at IU. Their school library program is like top 10 in the country. And so while I was teaching in the classroom still, I applied and got into their master's program and earned it while I was still teaching and have never looked back. It's been wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I did have to go back and teach in the classroom when we moved to Utah. There were not many school librarian positions open. So I went back as the classroom teacher for about 5 years, but I found that I was using so many of my librarian training work as a librarian in the classroom. And so I actually kind of am glad that I was class teacher, went to librarian school, was a librarian for a year, and then went back to the classroom for 5 years. And then now I've been in school libraries ever since then, in the junior high, middle school setting, and in elementary setting.
It's funny. I haven't yet had the chance to talk to anybody who's had I was in college and I wanted to be a school librarian. Like, it's always a little bit of a circuitous path. But when you were saying that some of the stuff you learned in library school, you brought back into the classroom, I had the same experience. Like, I went through library school and then I didn't get into a library position for a couple of years. Yeah. And being in the classroom, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I should have been doing for the past 20 years.
Right.
It's just, there's so many interesting ways that the library program just seems to intersect with, I'm preaching to the choir right now, but there's so many connections across the curriculum. And it's wonderful when a school does have the librarian who can see that and recognize that and work with the teachers. But anyway, I'm getting off on a whole other tangent. We'll fix education some other day.
I know. I was going to say that's a whole other topic, is what we wish as school librarians, what we wish was taught in teacher ed programs.
Yes. Oh,
Another
someday.
topic.
Yeah. Someday when we're in charge of the world, we'll fix that. But okay. What we're here for is
Yes.
an awesome lesson that you're sharing with us. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this lesson? Kind of walk us through, first of all, what's it called? So we all know.
Okay, I had a little trouble coming up with this because originally I just had it as today is. It's very simple.
Hey.
And essentially, you're telling the students what the special day is, that the observance, because it's not really a holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're eliciting student questions and their curiosity based on what today is.
I think that makes total sense. There's nothing wrong with simplicity.
Okay. Thank you.
So in terms of, so I love this idea because I think it really speaks to letting kids engage in learning in a way that really fits their interests and needs. So kind of walk us through when the kids walk in and you're ready to give them this lesson, sort of what are they going to see first? What's going to happen first?
Sure. Well, they could see it in a lot of ways. So we do have school announcements in our building right now. Not before when I started this lesson, but our principal will oftentimes say, today is National Ice Cream Day, or our students, sixth graders who say the announcements over the intercom the rest of the days of the week, they also will say plug in a special day that they have. So a lot of times the students will have already heard about a day coming in. Now I'm not ahead enough to coordinate with the principal or the students saying the announcement. So I might not always use the same one, but usually when the students come in, they'll see a slide up that says the special observance for the day. They might see a table with books about a topic, and might ask them, okay, based on what you see here, or with realia on the table, what do you think the special day is? And sometimes I'll have them try to figure it out based on the clues. So we're using inferences. But most of the time it'll be up on the screen as they come in. Yes.
So they see the day, and I love that you give them sort of a different kind of learning opportunity too, in that here are some related items. Can you make some inferences and connections like you were saying? So even if they're not aware, or if they don't catch what's on the screen, there's still an engagement component that can kind of pull them into what's going on. But I imagine if they see National Ice Cream Day, they are all in.
And imagine their disappointment, Steve, when they come in and they're like, "You're not giving us samples." I'm like, "No." Or pizza day, like any food day, they come in with like, oh, "She's giving us something," and I'm like, "Not tangible food." Let's imagine it.
Food for the mind, children. That's what
Yeah.
we're doing. Feeding your brains.
Yes. By about the third time, they kind of realize that no, I do not have those funds. I always tell them, I wish I did.
Yeah, right? It'd be great if we could just feed everybody all the time with all the fun stuff. But okay, so they're coming in. And by the way, are they coming in as sort of like a class to have this lesson, or is this more of they drop in and they kind of see this going on?
So this is for actual classes that I have in the library. At my old building, we had open checkout because I had an assistant. So while I was teaching, she could support with checkout. And I had this as a display. Every day I got to change it because I had an assistant. So, so things haven't changed. But when I taught as a school librarian in middle school, junior high, I had these out as passive programming. Because I wouldn't see the students necessarily. So I would connect it to a STEM activity or coloring pages or bookmarks or some kind of, challenge. I don't know.
Nice.
So it's just different depending on what school I was in.
I love that. I mean, I think a good lesson always has those elements that can be adapted to lots of different environments and lots of different grade levels and lots of different settings. So I love that you can do it as passive programming, you can do it as active programming. So actively, the class is coming in, they see the table, they've maybe got the picture up on the wall for here's what the day is. Where do we go from there?
From there, I just ask them, just very base, like, what do you know about this topic? What is this? How do you connect to it? What does it remind you of? And I let them turn and talk to their tables. And so that the truly, I say it, the student's interest drives what I do next. If they don't know a lot about a topic, we're gonna, maybe look it up, or we will read, browse a nonfiction picture book about it. If
Ooh.
they, it just depends on the students and what they're about, and especially with kindergarten versus sixth grade, we're gonna have a variety, right?
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine that's quite a spread in what they're gonna with the knowledge they're gonna bring in, but also in their way they're going to engage. And
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know, I can imagine it. I've always been a seventh grade or higher teacher.
Yes.
I never felt the ability to go into any of the K through six rooms. Like I can't imagine. I can only imagine, I guess. But
Yeah,
that's
it's pretty wild.
yeah.
Like when I taught in the classroom, I was always fourth grade and all the way up through ninth grade, and so that is my comfort zone. So
Mm,
anyone, like your last guest about Amanda talking about the littles, I always try to do so much PD around the K3s, K2s, because I'm like, what do I do?
yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you in that
Hmm.
boat.
Yeah.
So they're going to have these conversations. They're going to kind of talk through here's what knowledge we're bringing to the table. Maybe we're going to do a little bit of research. Do you use it as is this a place where you might insert some research skills, like some basic research?
Yes, yes. So depending on what this, I'll ask the student, sometimes they'll give me a question right off the bat. Well, how would they know what the most favorite ice cream flavor, just it could be anything that the student naturally is curious about. And then I will ask them, I'll pull up the screen and I'll be like, well, how would we ask that? Do we just literally type in what you asked? Or, I might do it and show them the results and be like, well, what do any of these results look like they're answering our question? And so it is truly guided by their curiosity. Sometimes, though, we don't get that deep. I mean, if I feel like they pretty much have it, I'll be like, well, if any of these materials here, the resources look good, you may come check them out. And a lot of times they want to just check out and want to start digging in. And at that
Hmm.
point, I don't want to interrupt their flow.
Right.
Um, so I don't always dive into research, but is eventually this is where I want them to just kind of see that this is our habit. When we learn something new or we hear something, we should generally try to connect to it, talk to someone else about it, and then ask a question or, do something with that fact.
I love that. And I think it's so important that you not only let them sort of guide the questioning, but that you're willing to say, you know what, we're going to not go into the deeper part of this that I might otherwise get into because
Mhm.
they've already expressed that they want to get into this other thing. Because I know as a teacher, as a many years teacher, it's so hard sometimes to say, I've got this lesson in my head and we are going to do this lesson come hell or high water,
Oh, yeah.
and then things might start going a different direction. You're like, no, I'm dragging you back onto this course, and we're gonna stay the course here. So I really admire and appreciate that you kind of have that mindset going into this lesson.
Because I really do feel like as long as they are reaching the goals that we have for them with the school library standards of inquiry based discussion, research, formulating questions, turning and talking, listening to each other, that communication piece, which are those soft skills that
Mm,
are hard to teach all the time, but in
yeah.
a natural way, it really does build on itself. I especially love it when students say, oh, I'm an expert on this topic. And then I'll tell them, okay, well, why don't you go and, write out what you want to share with us or draw what you know and then come back. Or some of them are ready to go right then and there and they want to get up and tell us everything. And I feel like that really gives them a sense of pride and letting their
Yeah.
voice be heard. On my blog post that I wrote about this, it was Star Wars Day, and all of this in my morning classes, they said, "Can we stay and present to like the rest of your classes what we know?"
Ha.
And I was like, "Sure." And so their teachers gave permission. I mean, and it also helped that it was May the 4th.
Yeah.
You can't always grab them. But I learned this from one of my colleagues when I taught in a Montessori junior high. She was the English teacher, and if she taught a topic, if a student was really passionate, they would ask, Miss Kevy, may I stay on next period and help you teach it?
I
And
love
she
that.
she was like, yes. And so and she was a seasoned teacher. And so I learned from her to kind of relinquish that power that we want. Steve, I'm kind of like you. I tend to overplan, and I'm like, but we have this song and I have this poem.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't want that. They don't need it.
Hmm.
And so I'll just kind of put that on the back burner. Or I have some students that don't want to participate necessarily, and I'll ask them, I'll say, hey, can you find a song on ice cream for my kindergarten class this afternoon? And then they have to go through and find a good one for the audience. And so I find that even if a student is not an expert or they aren't engaged, if I ask them to help me find something for the younger kids, they tend to, because then they're not scared of being made fun of by their peers,
I
which
love that
tends to
though.
happen in the sixth grade, as you know.
Oh yeah. Oh, tell middle school. Believe me, I'm there. But that's so great that they're like. I love that you think about how are you going to get those kids who maybe are nervous or maybe just aren't that socially engaged with their peers, and yet still bring them into the lesson in a way that is relevant and connected and still, values them as part of the research process. That's great.
It really is. And one more thing that I like to do too, and I know this lesson kind of sounds a little haphazard, but it really does work. So if, let's say, we have ice cream day that morning, and after that first class that comes through, they have taken all of my fiction and nonfiction, ice cream books, cookbooks, all of that. And I always will ask the students, well, what am I going to do with the next class? Like, you've took all my things. And then they'll usually, because I have the older students in the morning, they'll always be like, well, Miss Farokhi, you always say this is just one of the special days. And so when it's checkout time, I have class assistants in every class, library assistants, and
Nice.
I will pull those 3, 4 and be like, okay, why don't we find out what's another good day for today or week or special holiday for the month? And you guys go find the books for me. What realia should we pull down from the shelves? And they really love doing that. Um, or they'll look on their birthday on the calendar and they'll be like, my birthday's Thursday. It's, whatever day. Can I come and pull the books for your display or put out? And so I feel like it's a way for them to be a part of the library community, even when they're not in class.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So
That's so
that's
awesome.
another extension, but you definitely don't have to do that if you can't make it happen. But and I wouldn't have done it unless the students asked me. They're like, "Well, we took all your books. What are you going to do?" And I'm like, next class we'll do another bell ringer. It'll be something else. But they're like, "Well, can we help you? Can we pick it?"
Oh, that's so great.
So yeah,
I mean,
it's
that's absolutely a mark of a lesson that the kids are invested in, that they are engaged and concerned about how are the next students going to enjoy it as much as we did.
oh
Wow.
yes, oh yeah. And then
Huh.
for April Fools, they love to do just made up holidays that aren't. And of course, I let them because, I'm the nice teacher. I can't say no.
That sounds awesome, though. I bet you they come up with some really great ones.
Oh, yeah. And then the kids who believe it. This is like National Wear Green on Your Head Day. And they're like, really? I'm like, no. We're
You
like,
know what
well,
April's Fool is, right?
yeah. Oh,
Might
yeah.
need a lesson on that. So
Exactly.
is there any particular way you go about figuring out what tools or resources you're going to use for a particular day, or is it sort of like how I'm not quite sure how to ask the question in terms of like, do you do a lot of like pre-planning for it, or is it more of a like I've got an idea in my head for a day that I want to do? How do does it backfill one way or the other?
Well, it really depends on what our school or district is emphasizing. We have a lot of character traits and different month to month things that we're doing. And so if, for example, coming up here in January, I want to celebrate Creativity Week because AASL. and Crayola are doing the creativity week, and I'm on the promo committee for that. But it's
Nice.
also kindness week, and so I'm combining kindness and creativity, and that's going to be, in a couple of weeks, what our focus is. Obviously, next week coming up is Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, and so I kind of go with what I generally would do anyway because it's observances.
Hmm.
Um, but then I might look ahead, and if I have a really good book for a topic, like a standalone read aloud, I'll want to use, for like flight day, I might, do Unflappable or, just depending on it. But I try to plan out as much as possible. Yes, because those are the off the cuff lessons are not as great,
Yeah.
as I'm sure
Yeah.
you know. Although I've had to do them from time to time.
I think we all do. We don't
Yes.
love it, but it happens.
Yeah. But we're
So,
professionals. We know what to do.
yeah, we figure something out. I always figure on the worst days, my worst is better than nothing at all. So,
Oh, yes. Yep. For sure.
not not encouraging, but hey, at least it's something.
Yes. And I guess the go-to source I always use is our library catalog, our Destiny catalog. And so the
Hmm.
students know we're going there. I mean, they have it bookmarked, they have it on their iPads, and so that is always our go-to, and the tab is always open on my computer that's projected because they know most likely I start there.
Makes sense. That's a
Yep.
great idea. I'm just curious personally, in your catalog, do you have like books tagged with particular, like an emotion or a day or a topic that like might fit in?
Ooh, I don't, but I am going to put that on my list. That would be a great idea.
That's something I've
Yes.
been thinking about with my student volunteers. I want to have them maybe just pick books that you know, and what are some tags that we can add that will make it easier for folks to find this when they go searching. But
I really like that.
maybe that's something to add
Yes,
in.
for sure.
So you had mentioned that you have done this lesson in years past. So how long have you been doing this lesson for, would you say?
This is probably my 6th year that I've been
Okay.
really doing it a lot.
So what have you learned in the course of doing this multiple times, over the past several years?
Well, I initially started because my library, I didn't have a display area. I didn't have a bulletin board.
Okay.
And so what I did have were windows to the main hallway. And so what I used to do was just push a table up against the glass, and I would put my IKEA easel on top. And so if you look at my in social media post from about 5 years ago, you'll see it's through the glass, my display, and on the whiteboard, I've written, it's ice cream day, and I have my books, nonfiction, fiction books. I have my realia all around it. We celebrate author birthdays that way, illustrator birthdays, inventor birthdays, and then I would always put the books out. And whenever the student, the whole school would walk by that, just the glass doors or the windows into the library, and it would change every day. And so one thing I found was that the students look at that and they would come in to their library lesson, let's say it was a few days later, and they would be like, what happened to those ice cream books? What happened to those? And so I used to, when the day was over, if any of the books that weren't taken, I would just put them back on the shelf. But I learn to just still keep them out. And so instead of using a whiteboard, I started making signs and just kind of just propping them up with like a photo clip, just like
Nice.
on a book stack, like real DIY. Here's the ice cream books. Write it on a little index card and have a student decorate and be like, okay, well, while they're browsing, here are all the, displays we've had over the last week or so. And so that really helped me. So that not having a space for a bulletin board or something more traditional helped me with this idea. And so I realized keeping them out is good. Don't
That's
put the
so
displays
clever.
away
Yeah.
just because the
Oh,
day's over, because they might, still want to get their hands on those ice cream scoops or whatever realia you had out with it. Even if
yeah.
it's one object. And if it's that item that is drawing that student into wanting to check out a book, that's a win-win.
Oh, absolutely. Man, that's so good. I got to remember that. Next time I take a display down, it's just going in a stack over to the side.
You
Mm.
just never know. And granted, sometimes they collect dust and I'm like, okay, it's time to put the ice cream books away. And of course, the second I do that, you know what
Oh,
happens.
yep, absolutely. Where'd those
but
books go? I just wanted to get, yeah,
but
of
then we
course.
pull up the catalog and I show them. But like you said, if I have them in a list, easier to
Mm.
pull up. I like that. Brilliant.
So I was going to ask you about like accommodations and ways that you sort of differentiate this. And I think to my mind, it's pretty clear, but are there any particular ways you try and differentiate or adapt this for different groups?
Just the same way that I would do for other lessons. If there's students that need one-on-one support, I pull them close to me. We do it together. We have students that don't need the scaffolding. They can kind of be on their own and I'll come monitor them. We do have a lot of English language learners in my new
Hmm.
school. And so I have had to translate things on the fly. Um, but again, with Google Translate and a lot of students that are bilingual, trilingual, they are very fast to help those students kind of catch up and tell me what they're saying. Um, so that would probably be our biggest one is the English language learners that I've had to adapt most at my new school.
Yeah, that always is a challenge, especially if you don't have the materials in a language that might easily connect with them, or especially if you've got your ELL students in a group with mainstreamed English speakers,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the language barrier. I can see that being difficult, but I love that
It
the students help each other.
Oh yeah, and in our building we're about 75% Spanish speakers. And
Oh
so
wow,
we have like many translators in every class and they're teaching me Spanish and so I am learning so much, Steve.
that's awesome!
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Huh?
I was a little worried as well, but then once I spoke with the teachers that had been in the building, they're like, "Oh, just you wait. These kids are brilliant. They will translate for you anything. They're such
Oh,
like just diamond resources."
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Oh man, I love it when students get to be in that position of expert and that position of the authority on something, because I feel like we don't give them enough opportunities to do that sometimes in school. So that's outstanding for those students. Wow.
definitely. And even some students we get who don't speak Spanish. I mean, we have students from all over the world, but we do have some students who do speak Spanish and English, but because they were once ELL students too, they kind of help partner with the student that may
Mm.
not have a peer that speaks their language, but at
Hmm.
least they have someone who's can empathize with what they're going through. And so
Yeah.
that's a really big opportunity for our students as well.
Yeah. Hmm. So, okay. Coming back around to we could talk about this all day. We could do a 4 hour podcast. I have no doubt. But
We could.
let me try and swing it back around just a little bit. Um, what kind of feedback have you gotten from students? Let's start with students for this lesson.
They love it
I
because
imagine.
it's like sneaky getting your vegetables in, right? Maybe that's what we should call it. Because they know I always tell them I have library standards to teach you. It is not just play time because they come in and they just want to hang out because the
Hmm.
library lends itself to lounging, relaxing, which is great. But I'm like, we got
Hmm.
to do some work first. And then, and so for them, they come in and they see a topic and they don't know that they're about to do some work for me. And so the students get excited. So their engagement when they come in, or especially the ones who come in and they just immediately are like, no, especially like if you have to do origami or something like that, circuitry, they're like, no. And then by the end of the class, they want to stay and teach, whoa, sorry, and teach the next class. Um,
That's awesome.
and so the engagement is high. I did write a blog post for the Mentorist last year about a student of mine who is part Korean, and I had on the window at my old school that it was, National Korean Day. Uh, and she was just like, I have Korean heritage. And she didn't have library that day, but she ran in and was like bringing people, her friends, other teachers to the glass doors and like pointing. And then I taught with her mom. Her mom is a music teacher, and she texted me that night and was like, my daughter was over the moon that you highlighted her culture. And for me, that wasn't even, I was set out. I wasn't even having her that day, but that caught her eye. And it just really stuck with me that you never know who's listening, who feels seen and heard. Maybe they don't look like they are of that identity, but, just that you give that spotlight to someone who identifies with that or connects to it in some way shows that the library really is an inclusive place.
Yeah. Oh,
So
man.
that's been really, really nice from the students.
Yeah, seriously. How about, have you gotten any feedback from teachers on the lesson? Do they end up taking some of these
Yes,
skills into class?
they do. They love the realia. They'll sometimes ask me, hey, I'm doing a lesson on, sequencing, and we're going to be doing, how to bake chocolate chip cookies. Do you have any, baking sheets? This, that, mixing. I'm like, yes, here's my baking box. And so I think they're seeing the power of realia to teach, especially with our ELL students, because they need hands-on those materials, and our
Yeah.
students who have special education needs. Um, the older teachers, they love the research aspect, and the students just having books in their hands that
Hmm.
aren't the usual books they check out.
Yeah.
I won't name names, but we all know the top books that children check out nowadays, which is great because they're reading, but just to spread their palate a little bit,
Hmm.
broaden their tastes. They're impressed when a book about, history of ice cream comes in. Ice cream is getting a lot of
Yeah.
shout
Getting a lot
outs
of airtime,
today.
but I love
I
it.
do more than history of ice cream, but um, the teachers love that, or they'll connect to it. They'll say, "Oh, we're studying, Braille next week in our reader," or, "Oh, we're studying that." And so, if I was really on top of it, I will be better about collaborating with teachers about their curricular topics so that it really does hit home. But I feel like sometimes that's unnatural for students to come in and all of their teachers are teaching the same topic. It's
Yeah.
it's really hard to do that. When you can, it's great. But I also think it's better for the kids not to have it, because that next week they've got to use that recall, because that teacher will say,
Hmm.
remember last week in library, you were studying about this? Well, we're taking it, and they're just adding a new synapse, in their brain.
Yeah. No, it's great. That's great. So, if somebody's going to try this for the first time, do you have any advice, any things that they should be thinking about or be aware of as they get ready?
Um, I mean, I always like to just keep it simple and stick with the slide, or you can even just pull up like on like the calendar a day website, or some of the links that I put on the blog post about it. You can just pull up the website directly. You don't have to do a display, you don't have to pull books. Just getting them to hear what the special day is, how do they connect, what's a question they have, and then you can move on. I
Hmm.
mean, it does not have to be a big research cycle like I ended up doing with my sixth graders last year, where they actually researched and published a book, a class book. That's like the piece de resistance, right? That's like
Yeah.
what I want to do ideally with every grade, but we can't do that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would just start small, pull up the site, because a lot of the sites, the national calendar days, have like the history of the holiday, questions, milestones. Like I think they're seeing that teachers are using these,
Mm.
and more I'm seeing it pop up um, in other areas, which I updated my blog post with those just more instances of finding these connections to the special days.
I love it. That's awesome. Thank you. I love this lesson. I am thinking about how I might bring this into my middle school for my seventh and eighth graders a bit. I gotta do a little figure, but I think this I can definitely see a real engagement going on with this. Okay, we are
Great.
now going to go in a completely different direction. It is time for the book break.
Book break. Squiddy.
So Book break is awesome. I love it. We talk about any book you like. It can be something old, something new, something professional, something personal, whatever. So, what book are you bringing to the book break?
Okay. So I am bringing Daniel Nayeri's new book called The Many Assassinations of Samir, the Seller of Dreams. And I should say that this is an illustrated middle grade book, which I really love the illustrations. It's Daniel Miares is the illustrator. And I love this book because it is a kind of a epic journey of sorts of this boy who is called um, Monkey. Yes, he is named Monkey. He is an orphan and he works for Samir, who seems kind of like a swindler, but he is just a bodacious trader on the Silk Road. And so he saves Monkey in the first chapter of being stoned to death by the monks who have taken him in for stealing their robes. And so he trades things that he doesn't have to get Monkey as a assistant of sorts. And so each chapter is a different way that another assassin is trying to kill Samir, the one person who is taking care of Monkey. And at one point, Monkey decides that it's his turn, that he hates him so much that it's time for him to take him out. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what a fantastical story. It's got romance in it. There's like some really, really cool mythology of ancient cultures, especially Persian culture, which is my culture, and the author's culture. So this was the first time I saw it in this format, and it's very reminiscent of Persian storytelling. And so it reminded me of my grandma telling me stories when I was growing up. And it's just really funny too. I did not expect to laugh at so much violence, but it's hilarious.
It is. I've read this one. It's so good. Oh man, it blew me away. And it's funny because, as you were saying, like it starts out on this pretty dark note, but it is so funny. Like the whole thing, I was just grinning and laughing through the whole thing, even the assassination attempts.
Mhm.
And it just, one of the things I loved about it, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it has such a great turn to it toward the end, where you feel like you've gotten the whole story, like you get what's going on, and it's got these multiple points in the story that, like, all of a sudden you find out a new detail and your perspective shifts a little bit, like about halfway through, and then again about another halfway through, and then it's so cleverly done. It's just such an engaging story, and it may be a middle grades book, but I can see this is just an all ages story. It's so good.
Yes. Yeah. And as I was reading it, I kept going back and just double checking. I'm like, is this really for middle grades? Because I can see so many young adult readers enjoying it because of the historical aspect. And at the end, the author's notes with all of the research he did. And so you think he's making these things up. And then you get to the end and he's like, oh, no. This was normal on the Silk Road. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah. I could see this being such an awesome book for looking at craft, like author's craft and storytelling, but also for the history elements of it. Like there's so many ways I could see this being used in classrooms for like a real serious study, but it's also an incredibly enjoyable story.
Oh, definitely. And the social studies teacher came out in me as I was reading it. I started doing my own research on the maps and the people. And I was like, oh, Daniel Nayeri is like killing it with this one.
Oh, yeah.
He's fantastic. I love anything he writes.
That was the first one I've read by him, and I need to get my hands on. I have a copy of Everything Sad is Untrue, but I haven't gotten to it yet, and I need to because, like I said, Samir blew me away.
Oh, yes.
So good.
And I saw this first in a bookstore in San Francisco in April. And I thought I was like, my mind was playing tricks on me. I'm like, how do I not know about this book? But then it came out, all these people were saying it was on all these best of lists for the year. And I thought, oh, that is true. Like I did see that. And so I finally bought myself a copy with my holiday gift cards.
Nice.
And I devoured it in like 2 days. I couldn't stop. I couldn't put it down.
Yeah, it's absolutely unputdownable. It's such a page turner. Oh man,
Mhm.
love it. Thank you. That's a great title. Thank you so much for sharing your lesson. How can people track you down if they want to see what you're up to in the future?
Sure. Well, I am on Instagram. Our school library is on there. You can always see what we're doing. It's at the Story Spectator. I am also on Twitter or X at F Farokhi. And I'm also on Blue Sky. Thank you, Steve, for
Yay!
that invite code. Blue Sky at the Story Spectator on there as well. And I have a blog, The Story Spectator, and I am trying to be better about updating. It's just really hard to get up on a blog. So
Yeah,
I'm trying to do better, but I post much more frequently on the social media.
and lots
Yes.
of great stuff too. I love seeing your posts because it's always a great idea or like just a real nice smile inducer. Like it's, I really enjoy following you on social media. So
Thank you. Same
thank you
to
for that
you.
as well.
I learned so much from you and all of the people that are in your PLN. I
You
always
know,
follow them. So
we're
thank
better
you.
together, and there's just so many great ideas out there. And I love that when we get to share. And so thank you for sharing. I am so glad we got to do this. Hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the SLLN podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes, which include not only a link to the lesson, but also links to the SLLN website, home to a curated list of free upcoming virtual events and resources for school librarians. It's easy to become a member of the network. Just visit the site and use what you like. If you have an idea, a question, or a lesson you want to share, you can email schoolliblearning@gmail.com. That's school, L-I-B, learning@gmail.com. Know someone with a great school library lesson? Let us know. Until next time, be safe, be good, and be well.